The human body is basically a wonder. Not just the human body, but the entire existence of life itself is a huge wonder that we haven't solved yet. As for beings, there are mainly two categories: unicellular beings and multicellular beings. We as a being are multicellular. Being a multicellular being helps us perform more complex activities that are otherwise impossible as a unicellular being. But for these activities, we need more nutrients and more energy than unicellular beings. And this energy is transported all around the body by the blood. But the blood can't flow like that just around. And for this, we need an organ, a pump-like organ that is perhaps the most vital organ in the entire human body. Can you guess which organ it is? Yes, the heart. The heart is arguably the most important yet fragile organ in the entire human body, and although there is a huge debate, it is the most important. How does the heart work? What are the exact process behind each and every beating of the heart? What can happen to the heart if we don't take good care of it, and how can we counter them? Let's get started. Blood, as we call it, isn't completely a liquid like water, but it is in fact composed of very small minuscule particles. The main component of blood that gives its distinguished red appearance are red blood cells. But there is another main component of blood that constitutes to over 55%. Can you guess which is it? I'll give you a clue. It is actually named after a state of matter more popularly known as the fourth state of matter. Yes, it is plasma. Blood occupies 45%, red blood cells occupy 45% of blood, and plasma occupies 55% of blood. But plasma and blood are so well mixed together that we can't actually distinguish them at a single glance. And to distinguish them, we can use many different methods, such as centrifugation and using chemicals such as ETDA or ethyl diamine tetraacetic acid, that is an anticoagulant of blood. Centrifugation is a process that can separate heavy components of liquids from the lighter ones. The process of separating blood from plasma can also be done by a chemical called EDTA or ethyl diamine tetraacetic acid. So blood is composed 45% of red blood cells and 55% of plasma. Stem blood cells, bone cells, blood cells, fat cells, nerve cells, muscle cells, and a whole load of others are different types of cells that we can see in blood. Plasma is a pale yellow fluid that composes 55% of blood. The simpler nutrients that are formed through the process of digestion like glucose, amino acids, fatty acids, glycerol, etc. are transported through the plasma. Plasma is 90% water, 7 to 8% proteins like albumin, globulin, and fibrinogen. Albumin regulates blood pressure. Globulin helps in the defense against pathogens that enter the body, and fibrinogen helps in the coagulation of blood. The rest of plasma is basically fats, salts, hormones, etc. These nutrients are, as mentioned before, essential to different parts of the body. The blood cells, along with these nutrients, are carried throughout the circulation system. But with these, the blood also carries an important element that is essential for all parts of the body regardless. This is oxygen. When blood is pumped by the heart and it reaches its destination, the main so-called cargo in the blood, oxygen, is used up, and thus it is known as deoxygenated blood, or simply just impure blood. The beating of the heart also plays a role in reoxygenating the blood or making it pure. Quite often referred to as the most important organ in the entire human body is the heart. As we indulge in our day-to-day activities, the beating of the heart is always forgotten. Even if a slight irregularity takes place in the beating of the heart, it can be catastrophic. The heart is situated slightly tilted towards the left in between the lungs, behind the sternum in the thoracic cavity, which means it's roughly right here. Now, could you please tell me, how big could the heart be? You can pause the video if you want some more time. Yes, the human heart is roughly the size of our fist. It varies from person to person. When the heart pumps, blood flows to the blood vessels continuously. The heart, since it's a fragile organ, needs some sort of insulation, and thus it has the pericardium, a double-layered membrane that covers the heart. It is a thin sac that surrounds your heart. It protects and lubricates your heart and keeps it in place within your chest. The lubrication is made possible due to the pericardial fluids that are inside the mentioned two membranes. Problems can occur if the pericardium becomes inflamed. The swelling can damage your heart and affect its function. The wall of the heart separates into the following layers: epicardium, myocardium, and endocardium. Out of the two membranes of the pericardium, the inner layer is called the epicardium. The rest of the layers are in the order myocardium and endocardium. The myocardium is the muscle layer of the heart responsible for the pumping action of the heart. It occupies 95% of the cardiomyocytes mass and is the thickest layer in the heart wall. The thickness of the myocardial layer is dependent on the pressure which is present in each and every chamber. The endocardium is a thin, smooth tissue that makes up the lining of the chambers and valves of the heart. The innermost layer of the heart's walls serves as a barrier between the cardiac muscles and the bloodstream and contains a lot of necessary blood vessels. When we say the heart, this is perhaps the first image that comes into our mind, and it looks kind of complicated with all of these blood vessels running all around it. So, to simplify this, we can take off all of the blood vessels. Now, what we are left with is the basic shape of the heart. It looks pretty easy to remember and kind of familiar too. Yes, it kind of looks like the heart shape that we draw. Now, this basic heart shape is divided into four parts, the two parts being the atria and the ventricle. Now, since it's divided into four parts, they are respectively the left atria, the right atria, the left ventricle, and the right ventricle. The heart is perhaps the only diagram that is drawn as it is in the human body. For example, this part being the left and this part being the right, unlike in normal cases where it's the exact opposite. These four parts, the left atrium, left ventricle, and right ventricle, come together to do one function, the beating of the heart. And each of these perform in the left hemisphere and right hemisphere respectively. When the heart beats, all of the impure blood from all of the body reaches the right atrium. This is where the purification process begins. The blood reaches the right atrium through two main veins. Veins are blood vessels that carry blood towards the heart. Most of the veins carry deoxygenated blood towards the heart. The exceptions to this are the pulmonary veins and the umbilical veins, which both carry oxygenated blood towards the heart. Once the blood enters the heart to the right atrium, it is transported to the right ventricle through the tricuspid valve. The tricuspid valve is present there to prevent the backwards flow of blood. The blood reaches the right atrium through two main veins. They are the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. The superior vena cava carries all the blood from the top of the body, and the inferior vena cava carries blood from the bottom. Once the blood reaches the right ventricle, it is pumped out through the pulmonary artery that reaches the lungs for the purification process. But here also we have another valve, the pulmonary valve, that prevents the flow of blood backwards into the right ventricle. The term pulmonary usually refers to something that affects the lungs, or in this case, it refers to the artery that carries blood to the lungs and the veins that carry blood backwards to the heart again. The arteries are the blood vessels that deliver oxygen-rich blood from the heart to the tissues of the body. Each artery is a muscular tube lined by smooth tissue and has 3 layers. We'll get to that later. The pulmonary artery here takes deoxygenated blood to the lungs to get them reoxygenated. The pulmonary vein then takes the reoxygenated blood to the left atrium. This is where the process of pumping the reoxygenated blood to all parts of the body takes place. The blood moves from the left atrium to the left ventricle through the bicuspid valve. The bicuspid valve is also known as the mitral valve. It prevents the backward flow of blood from the left ventricle to the left atrium. Once the blood reaches the left ventricle through the left atrium, it is then pumped out through the aorta. The aortic valve is a valve in the human heart between the left ventricle and the aorta. These are some terms not to be confused with. It is one of the 2 semi-lunar valves of the heart. Important term, semi-lunar valves. The other being the pulmonary valve. The pulmonary valve acts normally as a one-way door from your heart's right ventricle through the lungs. The pulmonary valve and the aortic valve are known as semi-lunar valves because they are sort of shaped like a crescent moon. Now back to the normal image of the heart again. As we can see, there are a lot of branch-like veins going all over the heart. These are the coronary arteries. The coronary arteries supply blood to the heart muscles. Like every other tissue in the entire body, the heart also needs oxygen-rich blood for it to survive. So, in a sense, the heart is sustaining itself by pumping blood into itself. Quite weird scenario. The coronary arteries wrap around the outside of the heart. Small branches dive into the heart muscle to bring in blood. Coronary veins are responsible for draining deoxygenated blood from the myocardium into the cardiac chambers. The aorta branches into many different arteries that provide a blood supply all over the body. This entire process happens simultaneously, and any variation in the process can, again, be problematic. But how does the heart regulate this systematic beating progress? The systematic beating of the heart has to be maintained by something. And no, it's not the brain. So can you guess what maintains the systematic beating process of the heart? Yes, the SA node, or the sinoatrial node. The sinoatrial node is responsible for maintaining the beating process of the heart. It sends out electrical impulses that simulate the contraction and relaxation of the heart. And since it functions like an electric cell, it is known as the pacemaker. Any damage to the pacemaker, like all the other heart parts, is problematic. But medical science has proven to be possible to implant an artificial pacemaker that functions very much like a real pacemaker. If implanted, it should be right about here. And it functions very much like the pacemaker. It has 2 parts: the electric impulse sender that controls the beating of the heart, and the battery, or the source of energy for this machine. And since all of that can't be fit inside the human body, this artificial battery is actually carried around in a backpack or something like that. So now we know each and every process that is present in each and every heartbeat. So to summarize them, which are they? Yes. Firstly, the blood enters the heart through 2 main veins, the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. The pumping process begins in the right atrium. Once the impure deoxygenated blood reaches the right atrium, it is pumped into the right ventricle through the tricuspid valve. The tricuspid valve is present to prevent the backward flow of blood from the right ventricle into the right atrium. Once the blood reaches the right ventricle, it is then pumped into the pulmonary artery through the pulmonary valve. The pulmonary valve again prevents the backward flow of blood from the pulmonary artery into the right ventricle. Once the blood reaches the pulmonary artery, it is sent to the lungs to get it reoxygenated, and the blood comes back through the pulmonary vein and enters the left atrium. Once the blood reaches the left atrium, it is actually already reoxygenated. So the blood is then pumped into the left ventricle through the bicuspid valve. The bicuspid valve, like all other valves, again prevents the backward flow of blood. Once the blood reaches the left ventricle, it is then pumped through the aortic valve into the aorta, which then branches all over the body to provide oxygen-rich blood to all tissues to maintain life. This systematic beating process is maintained by the SA node or the sinoatrial node. If you have been paying close attention, you might have probably noticed that once the deoxygenated blood enters the pulmonary artery and goes to the lungs, it comes back as the pulmonary vein. And no, it's not the same blood vessel, just renamed, because veins and arteries have a lot of differences. So what connects these two blood vessels? To understand that, we must look inside the microscope. Now, as for blood vessels, there are mainly three types. Two of them you already know. Which are they? Yes, they are the arteries and the veins. Arteries carry blood from the heart. They are thick, elastic, made up of three muscular layers, and blood flows within them at high speeds and high pressure. The thick and elastic walls enable them to handle these high speeds and pressures. Veins, on the other hand, have a thin wall, carrying blood to the heart, and valves are seen inside. Blood flows at low speeds and low pressures inside the veins. The veins also have muscular layers, but not as much as the arteries. Now, I bet you're confused as to what the third vessel could be. They are not veins, no arteries, but they are actually a type of blood vessel that is a connection between the two. These are the capillaries. The capillaries are blood vessels that act as a sort of conjunction between the blood vessels that carry blood from the heart, that is, the arteries, and the blood vessels that carry blood to the heart. Which are they? Yes, they are the veins. The capillaries is where the exchange of materials takes place. So in the lungs, this is where the exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen takes place. The reoxygenated blood then flows back into the pulmonary veins. The capillaries are the smallest and numerous of them all. The capillaries are really thin, have a single layer of cell, have no muscular layers at all, and are so brittle that no valves are seen inside. Blood here flows relatively at low speeds and low pressure, since the small wall can only handle this much. Together, these three blood vessels make up the entire circulatory system in the human body. Now, we already know that our heart is a really fragile organ, perhaps the most fragile, and so we must take good care of the heart. Well, just for educational purposes, let's say we don't take care of the heart. A healthy heart is central to overall good health. Embracing a healthy lifestyle at any age can prevent heart diseases and lower your risk of a heart attack or a stroke. You're never too old or too young to begin taking care of your heart. Choosing healthier foods and exercising are two of the best ways to contribute to good health. There are a number of additional things that you can do to lower your risk of heart diseases. Things that put you at a higher risk for heart diseases include smoking, high blood pressure, obesity or being overweight, high cholesterol levels, inactivity, that is, no exercise at all, or this could even be a genetic inheritance. A heart attack or a myocardial infarction can occur when the blood supply to the heart is blocked. This can happen due to a fat buildup at any place in, let's say, the coronary arteries or any other blood vessels that supply blood to the heart. This can be life-threatening if not treated properly. A stroke occurs when the blood supply to the brain is blocked. This can happen when a blood vessel is blocked or when it bursts. It is quite similar to how a heart attack works, but at a really different location. The blockage interrupts the delivery of oxygen to the brain, which causes the brain cells to die. These are just some of the many other diseases that can occur to us if we don't take care of the heart. Usually, these are all preventable, but in any case they are due to a genetic inheritance, it is best to seek medical advice. So, we must be ready to observe such symptoms of heart problems like the heart attack or a stroke. A sudden chest discomfort, sudden pain at random locations, a shortness of breath, cold sweat, dizziness, etc. are some of the symptoms of a heart attack. Face dropping, arm weakness, that is weakness at any point in the arm or any part of the body, and a slurry speech are also symptoms of a stroke. Identifying such symptoms can help save a person's life from imminent mortal danger. You're in direct control over many of the things that you can influence your heart. It's up to you to choose how seriously you take this responsibility. Some people find it easy to adopt a healthy lifestyle. Balance is the key to eating healthy for the long term. Your diet should consist mainly of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and lean proteins. If you eat this way most of the time, you'll be able to indulge in other treats occasionally. The key is also to get up and move. Go for a walk, take the stairs at work, do some push-ups or sit-ups, dance, etc. Exercising can be helpful for preventing many of the heart and other related problems that can be problematic. So technically, a healthy diet and some exercise are only required to maintain a healthy life. And this is why many days such as the Anti-Tobacco Day, Anti-Drug Day, Heart Days, etc. are conducted to create awareness among people about the actual seriousness of not taking care of your health. So it is actually true that our bodies are a wonder with all of the complex organ systems performing each and every function. We can only hope that nothing ever goes even slightly wrong. But today, we have more technology than we did a few years ago in every field, especially in the medical field. It's surprising to see how much we've evolved in terms of technology. And in the future, we'll likely have more technology such as artificial heart transplantations cheaply or with 100% success rates. We could actually hope so, because fortunately, we are living in a time where this is actually possible and relatively easy. So that's it for today's class. Hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you.